Who has the first question? Yes, Jeremiah. Thank you, Cameron.
I wrote down, you mentioned an example of when you reject Christ, abortion may make sense to you because the wisdom of Christ is foolishness to that person. So let's just say you have a relative that may be in that category. What since you can't use Christ as your basis for truth, but you still want to have a relationship and conversation, I mean, what basis for truth can you, what basis for truth would we use then, if the conversation comes up?
Is that a question or a comment?
Question.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah, and thanks for the question, by the way, Jeremiah. And my answer is, I don't really have any. I mean, outside of Christ. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. I wouldn't be able to say, hey, there's another way to approach that if there was somehow truth outside of Christ. If there was some like other body of truth someplace. Okay, here's Christ, he's the truth. And over here, this is truth, and that's not Christ, but it's truth anyway. So we can use that. You know what I mean? And if there's a body like that out there, then I suppose we could use it. But I don't know of any. And Christ said, speaking in John 10, talking about the Holy Spirit come to convict of sin, righteousness, and judgment. Can I share your father's story that he told me last night?
Which one?
Yeah. Talking to Jeremiah's father last night. This very interesting story about how his, I believe it was your father, how he became a believer. No, your grandfather. Thank you. His grandfather. And Jeremiah's family's been in the plumbing business, shall we say, from the other end, for a while. And the downside of the plumbing business, the hard side, the side that nobody wants to do. And Jeremiah's grandfather was not a believer. And fill me in if I get this incorrectly, but at one point, I guess his grandfather asked, he was not a believer at the time, hardcore guy, fought in the Second World War, was a Marine, on the islands, in the East. Those were the tough guys that survived that. And he asked his, I guess, secretary or administrative assistant to do something that she felt was ungodly. Say it that way, ungodly. And this tough Marine says, you work for me. Do what I tell you. He said, I can't. And he said, well, there's other jobs out there. And doesn't this godly woman say, you know what? I suppose there are, but I'm not going to do this. And as I recall, that's what happened in your grandfather's life to cause him to consider the gospel. Yeah, I was thinking about that later. I'm guessing that you could have a whole book full of Christian apologetical material that would not have spoken to that man like that one gutsy woman did. The gospel is the power of God, and I just don't know. I just don't know how to talk to people anymore. The older I get, that's not connected with the gospel. Do you have a follow-up question or? Okay. It's a good question. Especially nowadays because we can't be judgmental.
I'm glad you brought this up. I hadn't really thought about it before, but this idea of how important children are in the acceptance or the rejection of the revelation of Christ. So, you know, you gave that example of those two gentlemen that gave all those examples of women killing their babies and sacrificing their babies and children. And it's just amazing that children are so critical to the belief of Christ and how important children are in how we view Christ. They are a reward. And that, even that passage, Psalm 127, it just really struck me this morning of how critical it is, even today, you know, people, abortion is horrible, and it's very popular today. And it's really a rejection of Christ and how critical children are to how we accept Christ. So it just really struck me this morning.
Thank you. The Bible's very clear on children. It was very clear that they're wonderful and a gift. I know it doesn't always feel exactly like that at IRBC at 10 after 10 towards the end of the sermon. I know it doesn't feel that way, but you know what? That's what the Bible actually says. And I don't know of any other, perhaps like you if I thought about it, but the Bible is just again and again from the Old Testament, the New Testament, Christ saying, allow the little children to come to me. We've got to get rid of our hostility here towards children. And the homosexual movement is hostile towards children. Call people who get married and have children, call them breeders. That's a derogatory name. Yeah, I thought about the, little off topic, not much. That Greek, by the way, I need to tell you that I did not read you the bad stuff about these people killing the babies. I stopped short of when it really, really got ugly. If you want to see it, I can show it to you afterwards. I mean, that was ugly enough. But I've often thought about that Greek island of Lesbos, from which we get the word lesbian, where apparently all the lesbian women lived. Happily ever after. Ever after? Not hardly. Can you imagine growing old on the Isle of Lesbos? And the only people to take care of you are older people like you? You know, one thing I hope when I'm old and can't take care of myself, whoever's taking care of me, I want them to be like significantly younger than me. Well, how are you going to get people significantly younger than you? Hint, not on the Isle of Lesbos. It's not going to happen. What a mess.
Joel, in verse 2, where Paul says, I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Why did he use the word know, as opposed to the word preach, or tell, or inform, or...
To know nothing. Thank you, John. Terrific question. Why? Did you get the question? I determined to know nothing rather than I determined to proclaim nothing instead of or preach nothing. I determined to know nothing among you. I actually believe that goes back to Paul's comments in Acts 20 to the Ephesian elders. Remember, he was sending this letter from Ephesus. And in Paul's sermon, if you will, to the Ephesian elders in Acts 20, that's where he says, I've proclaimed to you the whole counsel of God. You guys know that I've stolen nothing from you. And right there in that passage, it's I think one of the most powerful statements about what a pastor is really supposed to be. He says, I was right there with you the whole time. You guys know. And he says, and he uses that word, you know that I held nothing back from you that was profitable for you. And ultimately, preaching, pastoring, is not standing up here beside this pulpit. Anybody can do that. Or almost anybody. I believe Paul's idea of pastoring is to get close enough to your sheep to let them see what you really like and what you really do believe. I can be pretty good up here for an hour. What seems like an hour to you, I know. I can be kind of good, I suppose. But that wasn't good enough for Paul. He wanted people to know him and what he was doing. That's what I think he's talking about. I determined to know nothing about. And when he's talking about know nothing except Christ and him crucified, you know me and you know what I preach. I'm not just up here standing behind in a glass box someplace. I believe that's what he's talking about there, John. Good question, yes.
When you were quoting from Matthew Poole, the commentator,
Yes.
and he was talking about, describing some of the ways that pastors should be delivering the message.
Yes.
Using some adjectives, like I think one was gravely, another was, I can't remember all the adjectives, but I didn't.
Clearly, or, yeah.
Yeah, clearly, and.
I don't think he used that word, but yeah.
I didn't hear him say using humor, but I'm sure that's, that's obviously something that's even used in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they meant actually something slightly different when they use the word grave than what we have. We tend to mean it as dour, if you will. A frown on your face, the corners of your mouth turned down. And no running in the church building type of a thing. I think that, and this is brought out in the book The Light and the Glory. The Puritans are painted with the brush of being dour and hating having a fun time. Actually, they loved a good time. And they laughed a lot. And I believe what he means here by gravely, when they use this kind of term, is seriously. Because ultimately, even if a pastor, I believe, uses humor, he still has to be making a serious point. He can't be using humor just as an end in itself. I believe that's what's happening here. One more question. We have time for one more. One more after this one.
Actually, just to go off of what Mr. Haynes was saying, we didn't read the next verse when you stop it. It says, "Your children are a quiver full of arrows."
Right.
Or weapons.
Yep.
100%, yeah, that's pretty neat. But I had a question in the beginning of the beginning of your sermon. You talked about Moses. Did he straight up lie when he said he's not eloquent because of the way he was brought up? He was the prince of Egypt. Was that just straight up lie and an excuse?
I think he has some wiggle, a definite excuse. I think he has some wiggle room because you could say, I'm not eloquent enough. He said, I'm not eloquent. In the context, I'm not eloquent enough for this task. And here's why. See, he thinks it's going to be done through words, not through power. And I think in the sense that he is looking at it as honestly as he could, because he knows those people in Egypt. And he knows some Yahoo comes walking out of the desert, even if it's Moses. He has no words that are going to make them walk out or allow them to let them go. And I think that the story itself, the account, bears him out. Because he does go, and he, not Aaron, does say to Pharaoh, let my people go, then they go into the wilderness and serve me. And remember, Pharaoh says, okay, those are powerful words, you're a fine speaker, you can go now. And he doesn't let them go until he sees the power of God. So I would have to argue, in a sense, Moses was sort of right, but he wasn't seeing that God didn't care if he was skilled in talking or not. He called him. I'll give you the means necessary. Stop worrying about it. That's where I believe he really, really failed. He got stuck with Aaron. Bad move. It really was a bad move for him. Thank you for your kind attention here this morning.